It was another ordinary day in the life of Michael Jackson. Between commitments, rehearsals, and recordings, there was a special moment that he never left aside, reading letters from his fans. Every day, stacks of envelopes arrived at his home and his team's offices. Many brought words of affection, requests for autographs or emotional statements about how their music touched lives. But that day, a different letter caught his attention. It wasn't a flashy envelope, nor did it have glitter or stickers. It was simple, with slightly shaky handwriting and a worn seal. Michael felt a shiver as he held it, as if something there was waiting to be discovered. He opened it carefully and began to read. "Dear Michael, you may never read this, but if this letter ever reaches you, I want you to know that your music saved my life." Michael's heart beat faster. He continued reading, immersed in every word. The author was a young woman going through difficult times. "I suffered bullying at school, faced family problems, and often felt I didn't have the strength to continue. But whenever I thought about giving up, I listened to his music." She described how "Heal the World and You Are Not Alone" became her refuge. How his voice seemed to say everything would be okay, even when the world seemed to fall apart. After finishing the letter, Michael was silent. He had read many moving messages before, but something about this story touched him differently. He looked at the paper once more and whispered to himself, "I need to find her." Michael reread the letter, feeling a mixture of sadness and admiration for the young woman who wrote it. His words were sincere, filled with pain, but also with hope. There was something about the way she described her connection to her music that made him think. The part that touched him most came at the end. "Michael, I don't know if you believe in miracles, but to me, you are one. Your music is the reason I'm here today. I just wish I could thank you one day, not for fame, not for an autograph, but just to tell you, looking you in the eyes, you saved my life." Michael sighed deeply. Throughout his career, he has always wanted to use his music to bring love, comfort, and healing to the world. But this letter showed that for some people, his songs were much more than just melodies. They were a true support for the soul. He wondered how that young girl was now. Did she still need help? Was her music still managing to carry her through the difficult times? That's when he made a decision. He couldn't just ignore this message. He needed to find this girl. I needed to show her that her voice had been heard. With the letter still in hand, he called one of his assistants and said, "I want to find this girl. Do whatever it takes." The team exchanged glances. They received thousands of letters daily. How could they locate just one? But when they saw the seriousness in Michael's eyes, they knew there was no other option. They would make it happen. The search for the mysterious fan began there. The search began immediately. Michael's team mobilized to find any clue that would lead to the girl. The envelope did not have a complete sender, just a name and the state from which the letter was sent. This made everything even more difficult. Meanwhile, Michael couldn't get that fan out of his head. Who was she? What would your voice be like? What would your life be like now? He felt this story was different. Days passed, and the search seemed hopeless until one of the assistants found a possible clue. The young woman's name was linked to a school in a small town. They quickly contacted the institution. The answer came with a mix of surprise and emotion. The school principal confirmed, yes, there was a student with that name, but the next revelation made Michael hold his breath. She is no longer studying here. There was a weight in the director's voice. It was as if there was something more behind this answer. Michael asked them to investigate further. I needed to know where that girl was and what had happened to her. The connection he felt with this fan was inexplicable, almost as if destiny was guiding him to her. The assistant returned hours later with a new update, and this time the news sent a chill down Michael's spine. "We found an address, but you need to see this for yourself. Without thinking twice, Michael grabbed his coat, put on a disguise, and went out to find the girl who had moved him so much. He was about to discover the truth. Michael's car was cutting along the road under a cloudy sky. He was in the back seat, looking out the window, lost in thought. His hands held the letter tightly, as if that piece of paper could guide him directly to the girl. His heart was racing. He had already found millions of fans throughout his life, but this was different. There was something about that message that wouldn't leave him alone. After a few hours of travel, the car stopped in front of a modest house in a simple neighborhood. Michael took a deep breath. He wore a hooded sweatshirt and sunglasses to avoid being recognized, but at that moment it wasn't fame that mattered. It was the girl. One of his assistants knocked on the door. A few seconds later, it slowly opened. A woman, apparently in her 40s, looked at them with a suspicious look. "Can I help?" The assistant cleared his throat and explained, "We are looking for a young woman named Emily. She wrote this letter to Michael Jackson." The woman's expression instantly changed. Her eyes filled with tears, and she covered her mouth with her hand, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Michael, still silent, felt a tightness in his chest. Something was wrong. Did you come because of the letter?" the woman whispered, her voice trembling. The assistant nodded. The woman lowered her eyes and slowly shook her head. "Emily. Time seemed to stop. The wind blew strong, shaking the leaves on the trees. Michael felt breathless for a moment. "What happened to her?" he asked, for the first time breaking the silence. The woman took a deep breath, wiped away a falling tear, and then revealed something that made Michael's world stop. "She's gone." Those words weighed like a ton. Emily was no longer there. The fan whose story touched him so much was no longer alive. Michael felt a lump in his throat. He arrived too late, but her story wasn't over yet. Michael felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He stood still, processing the words of the woman in front of him. Emily was no longer there. Silence weighed in the air. He looked at the letter in his hands, now shaking slightly. That young woman who had found strength in her music, who had written such moving words, had left before he could meet her. How did it happen?" His voice was almost a whisper. The woman, still holding back tears, stepped aside and pointed into the house. "Please, come in." Michael hesitated for a second, but something inside him pushed him forward. He entered, taking off his sunglasses and hood. The room was simple, with family photos spread across the walls and some furniture that was a little worn with time. He looked around and then saw it. In the corner of the room, there was a small altar. Above it, a lit candle delicately illuminated. A photo of Emily. She was smiling in the image, with eyes full of sparkle. Next to it, small personal objects were carefully organized. A diary, a headphone, some CDs, and a poster of Michael Jackson folded in half. He swallowed hard. The reality of that loss hit hard. "Emily always dreamed of meeting you," said the woman, her voice breaking. "You were the reason she kept fighting for so long." Michael looked at the photo and felt his heart sink. He had never met her in person, but somehow it was as if he already knew her. "What happened to her?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the image. The woman sighed. Emily had been battling a serious illness since she was little. The doctors didn't give her much hope, but she always said that her music made her believe that anything was possible. Until the last day, she listened to his songs, holding this letter. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, trying to contain his emotion. He approached the altar and picked up one of the CDs. Dangerous, one of his most iconic albums. The woman nodded. Michael opened the CD case and found something inside. A small note, folded carefully. He unfolded it and saw that it was another letter, written by Emily. One last message. He took a deep breath. He was about to find out what that young woman wanted to say to him in her last moments. Michael held the note with shaking hands. The paper was a little wrinkled, as if it had been squeezed tightly many times. His heart was beating fast. He took a deep breath and started reading. "Dear Michael, if one day this letter reaches you, I may no longer be here. But that doesn't matter, because your music gave me a much longer life than the doctors said I would have. Every time I felt pain, every time I thought about giving up, it was your voice that brought me back. I wanted to meet you so much, to tell you this looking into your eyes. But if it's not possible, that's okay. I just want you to know that you did more for me than you know. Thank you for being my friend, even without knowing me." Michael squeezed his eyes shut, holding back tears. He felt a lump in his throat. How could this young woman, who had suffered so much, express such gratitude? Even facing death, she didn't ask for anything. I just wanted him to know that his music had made a difference. He closed the letter and looked at the woman standing next to him. "Can I have this?" She smiled sadly and nodded. "Of course. Emily would be happy to know you read it." Michael looked once more at the small altar. The candle flickered softly, illuminating Emily's face in the photo. He felt an urge, a deep desire to give back in some way. Then he had an idea. "Can I play something for her?" The woman opened her eyes wide in surprise. "Here? Now?" Michael nodded. "She never had the chance to see me sing in person. I want to do this for her." The woman covered her mouth, emotional. Then, without saying anything, he walked to a corner of the room and picked up an old guitar. Michael gently picked it up, strummed a few notes to feel the tuning, and then began to softly sing the song, "You Are Not Alone." His voice filled the small room, enveloped in emotion. It was as if, somehow, Emily was there, listening. The woman burst into tears. Michael also felt his eyes filling up, but for the first time since learning Emily's story, he didn't feel sadness. He felt peace. When he finished the song, he looked at the altar and whispered, "Thank you for writing to me, Emily." The gift he received that night wasn't just a note. It was a reminder that his music truly touched souls. But Michael wasn't finished. Yet, he wanted to do something more for Emily, something that would ensure that his story would never be forgotten. The silence that remained after the music was almost sacred. Emily's mother wiped away her tears and smiled, still not believing. What was happening? Michael put the guitar aside and looked around. For the first time since entering that house, he felt that he was not just a visitor, he was part of that story. "Your daughter was incredible," he said, looking at the woman. "I may not have met her in person, but I feel like I know her." Through these words, the woman was very emotional. "She talked about you all the time. When the doctor said she didn't have much time left, she put her CDs in her room and said, 'If that's the case, then I'm going to leave listening to the songs.' That made me live." Michael closed his eyes for a moment. The thought of his voice being the last thing Emily heard before leaving made him feel something hard to explain. A mix of pain and gratitude. "I wish I had arrived sooner," he murmured. Emily's mother smiled softly. "But you arrived. One way or another, you have always been here." Michael looked at the letter again. Emily's handwriting, shaky but full of emotion, seemed to jump out of the words. He realized that, even without knowing him personally, she had been his true friend, and then something came to mind. Did she have any dreams? Something you really wanted to do, but didn't have time? The woman thought for a moment, and then stood up. He went to a bookshelf and picked up a small, worn-out notebook. Emily wrote here all the things she wanted to accomplish. Michael took the notebook carefully. He flipped through a few pages and found a simple list written in colored pen. At the top of the list, a sentence caught his attention. "I want my story to help other people." Michael looked at Emily's mother with determination in his eyes. "Oh, can make this happen?" The woman blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Michael smiled slightly. "I'm going to tell Emily's story to the world." At that moment, he knew that his mission was not over yet. He couldn't change the past, but he could ensure that Emily's name and her strength would never be forgotten. And so, the idea that would change everything came up. The idea wouldn't leave Michael's head. He spent the journey back in silence, with Emily's small notebook in hand. Each page was a piece of that girl's heart. Every unfulfilled dream was a call for him to do something. Back in the studio, he sat at the piano and closed his eyes. The first chords came almost instinctively, as if they were already waiting to be discovered. He began to sing softly, testing melodies, letting each note carry the weight of that story. The image of Emily smiling in her photo never left his mind. The words came naturally. A song about hope, about never being alone, about finding strength even in the most difficult times. He worked on it obsessively for days. Each verse was designed to capture Emily's spirit, her pain, her courage, her gratitude. It was a song for her, but also for everyone who, like her, found refuge in music. When the recording was ready, Michael felt there was something special there. "This isn't just another song," he murmured. "This is Emily's story." But he knew he needed to do more. Just releasing the music wasn't enough. He wanted the world to know the girl who inspired him to write it. And then he had another idea. Michael didn't want this song to be just another track on an album. He wanted her to have a purpose, to carry Emily's essence into the world. The first thing he did was contact the girl's mother. "I wrote this song for Emily, but I want the world to know it. I want your story to inspire other people. Will you allow me to share this?" The woman was silent for a few seconds, holding back tears. Then he consented with an emotional smile. Emily would be so happy. She wanted her story to help others. With his blessing, Michael began to prepare something great. On the day of the song's release, he gave an emotional speech before presenting it to the public. "Some time ago, I received a letter from a young woman named Emily. Your words touched me in a way I will never forget. This song is for her and for everyone who, like Emily, has found strength in music." The first notes began to sound, and millions of people around the world heard the story of that special fan for the first time. The impact was instantaneous. The song became an anthem of hope, helping thousands of people who were going through difficulties. Emily, who was once just a girl fighting silently, was now remembered by everyone as a symbol of strength and overcoming. Fans began sharing their own stories of how Michael's music helped them through difficult times. The hashtag, #ForEmily, it went viral, and youth support organizations began using the song as inspiration in campaigns to combat depression. Emily's mother received messages from people all over the world saying her daughter's story was saving lives. Michael knew he had done the right thing. Not only did he grant Emily's dying wish, but he ensured that her legacy lived on. But he wanted to go a step further. There was still one last thing to do. Michael knew that Emily didn't just want to be remembered. She wanted to make a difference. His story was already touching millions of people, but he wanted to turn it into something even bigger. Then he had one last idea. In partnership with charities, Michael created a special fund in Emily's name. The aim was to support children and teenagers facing emotional difficulties, ensuring they had access to psychological support, art, and, of course, music. The announcement was made at an exciting event. On stage, Michael held the same letter that changed his life. "Emily taught me something very important," he said, his voice breaking. "Sometimes a simple gesture can save a life, and music has that power." The audience gave a standing ovation. The background for Emily has raised millions in donations, helping young people around the world find hope where there was once only darkness. Emily's mother was invited on stage. With tears in her eyes, she hugged Michael and whispered, "Thank you for not letting her be forgotten." Michael smiled and looked up at the sky. Thank you. He knew that wherever Emily was, she was smiling. The girl who wrote a simple letter now had an eternal legacy. And Michael Jackson, the man who inspired millions, was inspired by a single fan. The song ends, the lights go out, but Emily's story, it will never end. Michael Jackson always said that music has the power to heal and transform lives. And now, we want to hear your story. Which Michael Jackson song marked your life? What song helped you through a difficult time? Write in the comments, because each story keeps the legacy of the King of Pop alive. If this story moved you, show your support by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. This helps us continue to bring you inspiring stories like this. And don't forget to activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos. Let's spread this message of love, hope, and music together.